Ladies and gentlemen, today I stand before you with a bold message. I have completely shifted my outlook on gold and silver prices for 20. What I once believed is no longer valid. Why? Because the world we are living in is not static. It is dynamic, unpredictable, and rapidly changing. And if we fail to adjust, we risk being left behind. Gold and silver are no longer just commodities. They are signals of deeper truths about our financial system, our global economy, and the confidence or fear that drives human behavior. In the last few months, I've studied the changing tides, rising debt levels, shifting geopolitical landscapes, and the undeniable cracks in the global financial order. These are not theories, these are realities shaping the trajectory of precious metals. When we look at the world today, it becomes increasingly clear that the demand for gold and silver is not being driven by the same old reasons it once was. It's not just about tradition or speculation or an emotional attachment to shiny metals. No, what we are witnessing now is a structural change in behavior, both at the level of individual investors and at the level of entire nations. The shift is profound, and it's reshaping the way we must think about the future of these markets. Throughout history, whenever societies reached moments of uncertainty, moments where the rules of the game began to change, people instinctively turned to hard assets. Gold and silver were not chosen arbitrarily. They were chosen because they survived the test of time. Unlike paper promises, unlike currencies that can be created at will, precious metals carry the weight of scarcity and permanence. They are nature's form of money. And now, as 2025 approaches, we are watching the return of this age-old truth in real time. Let's start with individuals. The average saver, the average investor, even the average household. People are starting to realize that their financial safety is being eroded in ways they cannot ignore. Inflation, currency devaluation, rising debt, and the constant feeling that tomorrow's paycheck won't go as far as today's are creating anxiety. When that anxiety builds, people search for something that cannot be taken away by government policies or central bank decisions. And that is where gold and silver re-enter the picture. It's no longer a question of luxury, it's a question of protection. But beyond individuals, nations themselves are becoming major drivers of demand. Look at the global landscape. Countries that once placed their trust in the US dollar or other dominant reserve currencies are beginning to question the long-term sustainability of that trust. Central banks across emerging markets are diversifying their reserves, buying gold at levels we haven't seen in decades. They are doing this not because it looks attractive in a portfolio, but because they see the same risks individuals do: over-leveraged economies, political fragmentation, and the reality that no fiat currency is truly stable in the long run. We must understand something fundamental here. Demand for precious metals is not a matter of fashion, it's a response to stress in the system. When the system looks stable, demand fades. But when the system begins to show cracks, demand explodes. Right now, we are in the middle of one of those explosions, and I believe it will accelerate. Let me give you an example. Think of an investor in Europe who has seen energy prices fluctuate wildly over the last few years, or think of a family in Asia dealing with rising food prices and currency volatility, or even a young professional in America who has seen housing become unattainable and debts harder to manage. Each of these people is experiencing uncertainty in a very personal way, and while they may not all read economic reports or analyze debt cycles, they can feel instability in their daily lives. That feeling drives behavior, and increasingly that behavior leads them toward precious metals. Now think on a bigger scale. Consider a nation like China or India, countries with deep cultural traditions tied to gold. But it's more than tradition now, it's policy. These nations are buying, stockpiling, and integrating gold into their broader strategies to reduce vulnerability to foreign currencies. This is not a symbolic gesture, it's a calculated move to ensure financial sovereignty. That means the demand for gold is not only broad, it is strategic. And when strategic demand collides with personal demand, the market dynamic changes entirely. Here's the key. We are not seeing a temporary rush. We are witnessing the early stages of a long-term structural shift. The global economy is entering a phase of rebalancing, and gold and silver are at the center of that transition. For silver, the story is amplified by its industrial demand, but even for gold, the return of demand is overwhelming. And because supply is not unlimited, even small changes in demand can have enormous effects on price. This brings me to the psychology of demand. Most people think of demand as numbers, as statistics on a chart, but real demand begins in the human mind. When people lose trust, when they feel that their wealth is at risk, they act, and that action creates waves in the market. Those waves are what move prices, and those waves are building right now. We are not only talking about investors who watch every tick of the chart, we are talking about ordinary people, nations, and institutions all moving in the same direction. That alignment is rare, and it's powerful. The question is not whether gold and silver will see rising demand. The evidence is already there. The question is how far that demand will go as uncertainty grows deeper, because uncertainty is not going away. Debt levels are not shrinking. Inflationary pressures are not vanishing. Geopolitical risks are not calming down. Each of these factors feeds the demand, and together they form a perfect storm. This is why I changed my prediction. The story of gold and silver in 2025 will not be the same as in past years. It will not be driven only by traditional investment cycles. It will be driven by fear, by survival instincts, and by structural changes in how individuals and nations see money. When you have that combination, you don't just get an uptick in price, you get a revaluation of what these assets mean in the financial world. So when I say demand is rising, it's not a headline, it's a fundamental realignment. We are watching a world that is no longer content to rely on promises written on paper. We are watching a world rediscover the importance of tangible, scarce, enduring assets, and that world is preparing for uncertainty in 2025 by accumulating gold and silver at unprecedented levels. The takeaway is simple: demand is no longer optional. It is necessary for the individual trying to protect savings, for the central bank trying to secure reserves, for the nation trying to ensure sovereignty. Gold and silver are no longer luxuries. They are necessities, and that necessity will define the future of prices far more than any short-term market trend ever could. When we think about the foundation of any economic system, it comes down to one thing: trust. The value of money is not about the paper it's printed on or the numbers glowing on a screen. It's about the belief that when you hold it, someone else will accept it tomorrow in exchange for goods, services, or assets. That trust has been the cornerstone of fiat currencies for decades. But now, as we move into 2025, we are witnessing cracks in that foundation. And once cracks appear in something as fragile as trust, they are very hard to repair. This is the reason I have completely shifted my view on gold and silver prices. They are becoming the antidote to a weakening currency system. Throughout history, every time a currency was created and left unchecked, it eventually declined in value. It is the natural cycle of debt and money creation. Governments need to spend, central banks need to stimulate, and the easiest way to achieve both is by printing money or creating it digitally. For a time, it feels good. Economies grow, asset prices rise, and confidence seems unshakable. But then comes the consequence: inflation, devaluation, and the recognition that money itself is not a store of value. At that moment, people look for something real, something that cannot be debased. And historically, they turn to gold and silver. Right now, this cycle is accelerating. In many parts of the world, people are watching their purchasing power decline. What used to buy them a basket of goods a year ago now buys less. What used to feel safe in savings now feels like a slow leak of wealth. They are realizing that holding cash is, in effect, guaranteeing a loss. And when that realization spreads, it changes behavior at scale. Think about the US dollar, the world's dominant reserve currency. For decades, it has been the symbol of stability. But today, questions are being asked. Can a country that is running unprecedented levels of debt, printing extraordinary amounts of new money, and engaging in political polarization truly maintain that role forever? The short answer is no system can maintain dominance indefinitely. History shows us that reserve currencies rise, dominate, and eventually fall. Whether it was the Dutch guilder, the British pound, or now potentially the dollar, the pattern repeats. When confidence erodes, the world begins to look for alternatives. Gold and silver are not alternatives in the sense of being new. They are the oldest forms of money humanity has ever trusted. And the irony is, the more fragile the fiat system becomes, the more valuable these metals appear. They are not issued by governments. They are not subject to policies. They cannot be printed or devalued with the push of a button. Their scarcity is their strength, and their independence from political manipulation is their ultimate source of trust. Now consider what this means for nations. Central banks are not just holding dollars or euros anymore. They are diversifying. In the last few years, central bank purchases of gold have reached record highs. That is not speculation. It is preparation. They are preparing for a world where reliance on any single fiat currency could become a liability. This is not a theory, it is happening right now. And when central banks start leading this shift, it sends a powerful signal to everyone else. If the guardians of monetary systems are hedging against fiat, why shouldn't you? Silver, though often overshadowed by gold, benefits from the same dynamic. When people lose trust in paper money, they reach for tangible assets. Silver, with its smaller denomination and lower cost per ounce, often becomes the more accessible choice for individuals. For many, it feels like the people's money, a way to hold real value without the barrier of high prices. And as demand for silver grows, not only from this safe haven perspective, but also from its industrial uses, its role as a hedge against currency weakness becomes even more pronounced. The heart of the matter is that fiat currencies rely on confidence, and confidence is a fragile thing. It can erode slowly, almost invisibly over years, or it can collapse suddenly in moments of crisis. Either way, when trust goes, it does not return quickly. And when people no longer trust paper promises, they flock to assets that cannot be broken by policy or politics. That is what we are beginning to see right now, a movement from belief in man-made money to belief in nature's money. We can look back at moments in history to see the pattern. In the 1970s, inflation surged and gold prices soared as people recognized that their dollars were losing value every day. In the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, as central banks unleashed unprecedented money creation, gold again surged as confidence in fiat weakened. These are not coincidences, they are lessons. And the lesson is clear: whenever currencies are put under pressure, precious metals rise. But this time, the situation feels different. It's not just one country or one region experiencing doubt, it is global. Emerging markets are struggling with currency volatility, developed nations are dealing with unsustainable debt, and even ordinary citizens in stable economies are asking themselves, how safe is my money really? This convergence of doubt is what makes the outlook for gold and silver in 2025 so powerful. It's not isolated, it's systemic. There's also a psychological layer we cannot ignore. People do not need to be experts in macroeconomics to sense when something is wrong. They may not know the intricacies of debt cycles or monetary policy, but they can feel instability. They see prices rising in their daily lives. They hear about government deficits. They watch geopolitical tensions on the news, and collectively those signals tell them something is breaking. That gut level awareness is enough to trigger behavior. And when millions of individuals act on that instinct, markets move. So when we talk about declining trust in fiat currencies, it's not abstract. It is lived reality. It is the worker in Argentina watching his paycheck evaporate in days. It is the saver in Turkey whose bank deposits lose value overnight. It is the retiree in the United States who realizes that interest on savings cannot keep pace with rising living costs. These are not academic points, they are human experiences. And those experiences are fueling a movement toward gold and silver as safe havens. In 2025, I believe this trend will not just continue, but intensify. The debt burdens are too large to unwind gracefully. The temptation for governments to print more money is too strong. The pressures on the global order are too complex to resolve quickly. All of these forces weaken fiat, and each time fiat weakens, gold and silver strengthen. That is the inverse relationship we cannot escape. Ultimately, this is why I have changed my prediction. It is not about chasing short-term price action or reacting to market noise. It is about recognizing a deeper truth. When trust in fiat money declines, real assets rise. And today, trust is declining at a scale and speed that makes gold and silver not just attractive, but necessary for individuals, for nations, for anyone who wants to preserve wealth in an uncertain time. The logic is inescapable. The currency system is fragile, and gold and silver are the antidote. Silver is often underestimated. People tend to think of it as gold's little brother, a secondary asset that follows behind whenever gold makes a move. But that perception is outdated and misleading. In today's world, silver is not only a store of value, it is a strategic resource with a dual identity, part safe haven, part industrial powerhouse. And it is precisely this dual role that makes me completely change my outlook on silver's future. As we look toward 2025, silver has the potential to outperform expectations because it stands at the intersection of finance, technology, and necessity. Let's start with the safe haven side. Like gold, silver has been trusted for thousands of years as money. It has served as currency in more societies than gold ever did, precisely because its lower value per ounce made it more practical for everyday use. That legacy has not disappeared. In fact, it is being rediscovered by a generation that feels increasingly uncertain about the stability of fiat currencies and the reliability of the financial system. For many individuals, especially in developing economies, silver is the affordable alternative to gold. It allows people to protect themselves with something tangible, something that can be held in the hand without needing to spend large sums. This accessibility is powerful because when confidence erodes, millions of ordinary people don't just want protection, they demand it. And silver becomes their entry point into hard assets. But beyond its role as money, silver today is essential to the technologies shaping the future. This is what sets it apart. The modern world cannot function without silver. It is not an exaggeration to say that silver is woven into the very fabric of our technological progress. It is the most conductive metal we know, both electrically and thermally. That makes it indispensable in electronics, solar panels, medical equipment, and countless other applications. Unlike gold, which is largely stored away, silver is consumed. Once it's used in a solar panel or an electronic device, it doesn't just sit in a vault. It becomes part of the infrastructure of modern life. That dynamic creates a demand profile that is not just financial but industrial, and this is where the story becomes truly compelling. Consider the push toward renewable energy. Governments around the world are pouring trillions into the green transition. Solar energy, in particular, is expanding at an extraordinary pace, and silver is at the heart of that revolution. Every solar panel requires silver, and the scale of deployment needed to meet global climate goals is staggering. That means silver is not just desirable, it is essential for the energy systems of the future. And unlike fiat currencies, you cannot print silver into existence. Supply has limits, and mining cannot instantly scale up to meet surging demand. That imbalance between growing industrial need and constrained supply sets the stage for significant upward pressure on prices. Now add to this silver's role in technology more broadly. It is critical in electronics, from smartphones to computers to vehicles. As electric vehicles grow in adoption, their reliance on silver grows with them. Every battery, every circuit, every connection needs silver's unique convective properties. The more technology advances, the more silver is required. And this is not optional. You cannot substitute another material at scale without losing efficiency and performance. Silver's role is structural and it cannot be replaced easily. Here is the key insight. When you have an asset that functions as both money and an industrial necessity, its demand base is far more resilient. If investors lose interest temporarily, industrial demand picks up the slack. If industrial demand slows in a downturn, investors seeking safety provide support. That dual demand creates a unique form of balance, and at times it creates explosive upward momentum when both forms of demand rise together. I believe that is exactly the situation we are heading into now. Think about the psychology of investors. As uncertainty rises, they naturally flock to tangible assets. Gold captures the headlines, but silver benefits too. At the same time, the global economy is investing heavily in technological transformation. Renewable energy, electrification, digitalization, all of these are mega trends that require silver. So on both fronts, silver stands to benefit. Investors will buy it to protect themselves, industries will buy it to fuel growth, and governments will buy it to secure strategic resources. That convergence is rare, and it is powerful. Another important factor is supply. Silver mining is not as straightforward as people assume. Much of the world's silver is produced as a byproduct of mining other metals, such as copper or lead. That means silver supply is not easily ramped up to meet higher demand. Even if prices surge, producers cannot simply flood the market with new silver overnight. This structural limitation creates an imbalance that amplifies price movements. When demand rises, supply cannot keep pace, and prices respond sharply. That makes silver's dual role even more significant because both financial and industrial pressures are pulling on a relatively constrained resource. History gives us a glimpse of what can happen in such scenarios. During times of monetary stress, silver prices have spiked dramatically, but in today's context, those monetary pressures are layered on top of unprecedented industrial demand. That combination is different from the past. It means silver is not just repeating history, it is writing a new chapter. We also have to recognize the cultural aspect. In many countries, silver is deeply ingrained in traditions, jewelry, and savings habits. As incomes rise in places like India and other parts of Asia, silver demand for cultural and practical purposes is also expanding. This adds yet another layer of resilience to demand because it is not purely financial or industrial, it is also cultural and personal. So when I look ahead to 2025, I see silver positioned at a unique crossroads. On one side, it represents safety in an uncertain monetary system. On the other side, it represents growth in an industrial and technological revolution. Most assets in the world can claim one or the other, but rarely both. That dual role is why I have dramatically changed my prediction. Silver is not just a smaller version of gold, it is something entirely different with its own drivers and its own story. And this is where psychology again plays a role. Once investors realize that silver is more than just a shadow of gold, once they understand its industrial indispensability, the perception of silver will shift. When perception shifts, demand follows. And when demand rises in a market with constrained supply, prices must adjust. It is almost inevitable. The takeaway is simple. Silver is no longer just about history. It is about the future. It is money and machine, safety and technology, culture and necessity. In a world where fiat currencies are weakening and industries are transforming, silver stands at the center of both narratives. That dual identity is not a weakness, it is a strength. And it is why silver, perhaps more than any other asset, has the potential to redefine how we think about value in 2025 and beyond. Markets are not just about numbers, charts, and data. They are about people. They are about the way people think, feel, and react under conditions of uncertainty. Behind every price movement, behind every chart that analysts study, there are millions of individual decisions, and those decisions are shaped by psychology. This is why the psychology of fear and confidence is such a critical driver for gold and silver. Prices don't just move because of supply and demand in the mechanical sense. They move because of how people perceive risk and safety and how they collectively behave in response to those perceptions. When confidence is high, people feel secure holding paper assets, currencies, or equities. They believe tomorrow will look like today, only better. They trust the system, they trust policymakers, and they trust the value of money. In such an environment, the appetite for gold and silver tends to diminish. After all, why hold something that doesn't yield interest or dividends when everything else seems to be working? But the moment that confidence is shaken, the psychology changes almost overnight. Fear takes root, and with it comes a surge in the demand for tangible, scarce, time-tested assets. That is where gold and silver shine brightest. We can see this dynamic play out throughout history. In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, fear drove people out of equities and into hard assets. In the 1970s, when inflation soared and currencies weakened, fear drove a massive wave of investment into gold and silver. In 2008, when the financial system nearly collapsed, confidence evaporated, and precious metals once again became the go-to safe havens. These moments remind us of a simple truth: markets are human, and humans are emotional. The line between greed and fear, between confidence and panic, is thin. As we approach 2025, the conditions for a psychological shift are building once again. Debt levels are historically high, inflation has proven to be more stubborn than many expected, and geopolitical tensions are growing. People see uncertainty in their daily lives, in rising costs, in volatile markets, in unstable politics, and that uncertainty chips away at their sense of security. Even if the numbers on official reports paint a stable picture, the lived experience often tells a different story, and when lived experience contradicts official assurances, trust erodes. That erosion is psychological, and it drives behavior more powerfully than any statistic. One of the most important aspects of fear is that it spreads quickly. Confidence takes years to build, but fear can spread in days. A single event, a market crash, a banking failure, a geopolitical shock, can trigger a cascade of reactions. Investors sell riskier assets. They pull money out of banks. They look for safety wherever it can be found. Gold and silver, because of their universal recognition and historical reliability, become immediate beneficiaries of this shift. It doesn't matter whether someone is in Asia, Europe, or the Americas. The instinct is the same: seek shelter in something tangible. This is why psychology matters so much. The value of gold and silver is not just about their physical properties, it is about their symbolic power. They represent safety, permanence, and independence from political systems. When people lose confidence in governments, in central banks, in financial institutions, these metals take on an almost psychological role as anchors of stability, and that role amplifies demand far beyond what simple supply and demand models predict. Now let's think about the dual nature of confidence. It's not only about individuals, it's also about nations and institutions. When central banks buy gold, it's not just a financial decision, it's a psychological signal. It tells the world that even those who manage fiat currencies do not fully trust them. That signal reverberates, and it strengthens the narrative for individuals and investors. Confidence in fiat weakens, confidence in gold strengthens. The psychology reinforces itself, creating a feedback loop. Silver plays into this psychological dynamic in a unique way. For ordinary people, silver feels accessible. It is the metal they can actually afford to accumulate in meaningful quantities. That accessibility gives it a grassroots psychological appeal. When fear rises among the population at large, silver demand can surge on a scale that gold cannot always match. Simply because of price barriers, it becomes not just an investment of the wealthy, but of the many. That democratization of demand is fueled by psychology. It is the collective belief that holding something real, no matter how small, is better than holding paper promises. The other dimension to psychology is greed. Fear pushes people into safe assets, but greed also plays a role. Once people see gold and silver prices rising, they want to participate. Even those who may not understand the underlying reasons are drawn by momentum. They see their neighbors buying, they read headlines about record highs, and they feel the pull of opportunity. This blending of fear and greed can create powerful surges in demand, where initial caution evolves into a rush that feeds on itself. Markets become less about fundamentals and more about crowd psychology, and precious metals often see their sharpest moves in these periods. The key point is that markets are not rational machines, they are emotional ecosystems. And in 2025, with uncertainty rising and trust eroding, the emotional drivers favor gold and silver. It is not enough to analyze supply chains, mining production, or interest rates. We must also analyze human behavior because it is the human element that turns slow moving trends into sudden shifts. And right now, the human element is leaning toward fear, caution, and the search for safety. Fear also has a memory. People remember the pain of past crises. They remember losing savings to inflation, seeing markets crash, watching currencies devalue. That memory does not disappear. It shapes their decisions today. In many countries, people carry generational memories of currency collapses, and those memories make them more inclined to hold gold and silver as insurance. Psychology is not just about the present, it is about the stories people tell themselves from past experiences, and those stories are powerful motivators of behavior. This is why I believe the psychology of fear and confidence will be one of the dominant forces shaping precious metal prices in 2025. The cracks in the system are visible. People may not always articulate them in technical terms, but they feel them, and feelings drive action. The fear of losing wealth, the fear of uncertainty, the fear of instability, these are universal, and when those fears rise, gold and silver become universal answers. So the conclusion is straightforward. Prices are not just about charts, they are about confidence. When confidence is high, fiat thrives and metals sleep. But when confidence weakens, and all signs point to that happening now, fear awakens demand. And once fear takes hold, it does not let go easily. Gold and silver will not just be investments in 2025, they will be psychological lifelines, symbols of security in a world that feels increasingly insecure.